Let's move on to what I consider to be one of the most important stories going on right now in Canada, without a doubt. Bless the Ottawa Citizen. I've got to really look into the Ottawa Citizen because the Ottawa Citizen is not fucking around. The Ottawa Citizen is not messing around when it comes to this stuff. They're not being like explosive about it. They are just reporting the facts. But the fact that they're putting it out there and the fact that they're reporting these facts tells me I don't know who owns the Ottawa Citizen, and I'm going to find out because I'm very impressed with their reporting recently. Here's the headline. Canadian officials who met with Ukrainian unit linked to neo-Nazis feared exposure by news media, documents. A year before the meeting, Canada's Joint Task Force Ukraine produced a briefing on the Azov Battalion acknowledging its links to Nazi ideology. This comes from David Pugliese. Canadian officials who met with members of a Ukrainian battalion linked to neo-Nazis didn't denounce the unit, but were instead concerned the media would expose details of the get-together, according to newly released documents. The Canadians met with and were briefed by leaders of the Azov Battalion on June 2018. The officers and diplomats did not object to the meeting, and instead allowed themselves to be photographed with battalion officials, despite previous warnings that the unit saw itself as pro-Nazi. The Azov Battalion then used those photos for its online propaganda, pointing out the Canadian delegation expressed hopes for further fruitful cooperation. After a journalist asked the Canadian forces about the Azov social media postings, officers scrambled to come up with a response, according to documents obtained by this newspaper through access to information law. Lieutenant Colonel Fraser Auld, commander of Canada's Joint Task Force Ukraine, warned that a news article might soon be published and could result in questions being asked inside the Canadian government about why such a meeting took place. A year before the meeting, Canada's Joint Task Force Ukraine produced a briefing on the Azov Battalion, acknowledging its links to Nazi ideology. Multiple members of Azov have described themselves as Nazis, the Canadian officers warned in their 2017 briefing. Bernie Farber, head of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, said the Canadians should have immediately walked out of the Azov Battalion briefing. Canadian Armed Forces personnel do not meet with Nazis. Period. Full stop, Farber said. This, a horrendous mistake that shouldn't have been made. Farber said it was also disturbing that the Azov unit was able to use the Canadians in propaganda attempts to legitimize its far-right ideology. Besides its support of Nazi ideology, Azov members have been accused of war crimes and torture. One gathering that journalists didn't find out about was a December 2018 event in Ukraine attended by then Canadian Army Commander Lieutenant General Jean-Marc Lanthier, according to the documents. Members of the Azov Battalion were present, but again, instead of denouncing the battalion's Nazi sympathies, the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Forces focused concern on the possibility that photos might have been showing Canadian soldiers with members of the Azov unit. Chris Henderson, then Assistant Deputy Minister for Public Affairs, emailed more than 20 D&D public relations officers worried that photos might appear online. Do we have a clear expression of CAF policy towards this group? He asked of the Azov Battalion. This may or may not prompt questions, but we need to be ready and not come across as being taken by surprise. Jamie Kersner-Roberts, Policy Director of the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Centre, said that Canada had to make it a priority that its military personnel have no involvement with far-right fascist militias in Ukraine under any circumstances. It's concerning that, for the second time in a month, we have seen evidence of Canadian military officials again engaging with Ukrainian neo-Nazi groups, she added. Kurtzner Roberts was referring to a recent report from an institute at George Washington University in the United States, revealing that Centura, a far-right group made up of Ukrainian soldiers linked to the Azov movement, boasted they received training from Canada and other NATO countries. Researchers with the university tracked social media accounts of Centura, documenting its Ukrainian military members giving Nazi salutes, promoting white nationalism, and praising members of Nazi SS units. In 2018, the U.S. Congress banned the use of U.S. funds to provide arms, training, and other assistance to the Azov Battalion because of its links to far-right and neo-Nazis. National Defense spokesman Dan Lebouthiller said that Canadian military was examining its policies on the vetting of foreign troops it trains, as well as the information uncovered by the George Washington University report. He had earlier noted that the 2018 meeting with Azov Battalion members was planned and organized by Ukrainian authorities. Canadian military representatives had no prior knowledge of those who would be attending, he added. Le Boltier noted it was the job of the Canadian Defense Attaché to assess the information in the conflict zone. Canada has not, does not, and will not be providing support to Azov and affiliated entities, Le Boltier said. In 2019, the Sufen Center, created by former FBI agent Ali Sufen, who was involved in a number of counterterrorism cases, warned about the connection between the Azov Battalion and white nationalists. In Ukraine, the Azov Battalion has recruited foreign fighters motivated by white supremacy and neo-Nazi beliefs, including many from the West, to join its ranks and receive training, indoctrination, and instruction in irregular warfare, the report outlined. The Azov Battalion has been formally incorporated into the Ukrainian military, at least in theory, the Sufen Center report noted. But the battalion has cultivated a relationship with members of the Atomwaffen Division, a US-based neo-Nazi terrorist network, it added. And what this report is not touching on is that we have funded Nazi groups in Ukraine, thanks to Chrystia Freeland, whose grandfather was a Nazi collaborator, it has to be added. We have sold weapons to them and we have trained them. They have bragged about it on social media and they have talked about it and we have confirmed it ourselves. So our current leadership, the Liberal Party, seems extremely sympathetic and extremely willing to work with neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. And here we have several moments where our own military seems completely fine with walking into a room with neo-Nazis, and their concern isn't the denunciation of Nazi groups, or even walking away from those meetings and saying those meetings should not have happened, and then denouncing them, but rather attempting to discover how bad the fallout will be once it begins to be reported. We are collaborating with Nazis, guys. Like, I don't know what you need to see and I don't know what we need to say in order to express the extraordinary seriousness of this. We are collaborating with Nazi organizations that are working to seize power throughout Europe. Why are we doing that? Why are we funding Nazi groups? Why are we talking to Nazi groups? Why are we legitimizing Nazi groups? This is very, very, very serious. And it's extremely concerning to me that the Liberal Party seems fine with it. It's extraordinary. Yeah, if you've made it to this point, like, share, subscribe. We need to spread this around. People need to know. People need to know that their leadership is working with Nazi groups. Explicitly working with them. We've funded them, we've armed them, we meet with them, and we don't seem to be concerned about it from a moral position. Like, share, subscribe, spread it around. If you want people to actually be reporting on this kind of stuff, you got to support them. My Patreon is down below. Good luck. We're going to need it.